Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Java Graphics. Today we're going to be talking about circle-circle collisions. In other words, what happens when two circular objects on your screen collide or overlap on your frame. Now we're going to be using the code that we've used in prior videos, so if you missed any of those, I'm going to put a link in the description below so you can catch up on anything you may have missed. Anyway, let's get going with those circular collisions. If you want to learn Java programming, or just programming in general, subscribe to this channel. We put out a lot of videos that range from beginner topics to more advanced programming concepts. Also, please like this video, share it with a friend, and write a comment as well. It goes a long way to help promote a channel like this. Now, let's get back to the video. So here we have two circles, one blue, one red. Let's just refresh our memory real quick. Each circle has a position, an X and a Y position. We'll call it XB and YB for the blue circle and XR, YR for the red circle. Those are not the centers of the circles. Those are the upper left point of the box surrounding the circle or bounding the circle. And because it's a circle, that bounding box is going to be a square. Now there's also a right edge and a lower edge to that circle or bounding box. And the right edge is the left edge plus the circle's diameter or width. The lower edge is the circle's upper edge plus the height or the diameter. Because it's a circle, both the width and the height are going to be the same, so we can call it a diameter. Same thing for the red circle. Now the distance between the two centers of the circle is marked here, and we use the distance formula. I bet you never thought you'd see that one again. Speaking of which, just in case you forgot, there it is. The distance formula is the difference between the two x coordinates squared plus the difference between the two y coordinates squared, and then you take the square root of the whole thing. In case you were wondering, this is derived from the Pythagorean theorem, but I digress. Anyway, what happens when the circles are touching? Well, this distance formula is going to be equal to something. Specifically, it's going to be equal to the length of the blue radius plus the length of the red radius. That means that the circles are just touching, but they're not overlapping yet. When they are overlapping, the distance between the centers of the circle will be less than the sum of the radii. And that's all we need to check. So let's head over to NetBeans and make this happen. So here we are in NetBeans. This is the original code where we had one rectangular blue paddle, and we can move it around with our arrow keys. And we had this red ball bouncing around, and it never gets off the edge of the screen. It just bounces as if they're walls. So what we're going to do first is, because we want to deal with circles, we're going to change this program to get rid of our rectangle. So the first thing we're going to do, we're still going to keep the variable, but we're going to scroll down here, and instead of drawing the rectangle, we're just going to get rid of it. And we're not going to allow the rectangle to move either. So now when we run this, all we have is the ball bouncing around the screen. But you can't really collide with itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to make an array of 10 bouncing balls. So let's do that. First, we're going to change our variable to an array. And then we're going to come down here where we actually instantiate the ball. And we're first going to create our array. And now what we're going to do is we're going to loop through all the items in this array and create a new ball for each. Okay. Now, the problem here is we're creating all the balls at the same location. So what we really should do is we should create them at different locations so we can see them. So let's actually create random numbers. Let's create the ball at a random x position and a random y position. So the random x position will be a random integer between 200 and 800. We're picking a random double that's between 0 and 600, and then we're adding 200 to it. Now for the y position, let's pick a random number between 100 and 400. Now if you've missed the video on random number generation, I'm going to put a link in the description below so you can catch up on that, so you can understand this just in case you missed it. So anyway, we now have 10 different balls, and they're going to be at random positions. So let's scroll down here. Now in the paint component method, we have to draw all of them. So let's loop through. And there we go. We're looping through all the balls, and we're making sure they're not null, and then we're drawing each ball. Of course, we do have to double check, just in case, we have to make sure the array is not null. So we have to say if, because remember, with these graphics, there's no guarantee that this is going to run after the ball array has been created. So we just need to make sure that the array is not null. And now in our loop method, we're moving the ball, but now we have to move all of them. Okay, so let's check it out. We should have 10 balls bouncing around the screen, and there they are. Now you notice they're all moving in sync, and that's because in the ball class, if you see, our velocities are always the same. So maybe we should have them jumping around in different locations. Different directions, I should say. So let's pick a random velocity, say between 1 and 5. And then we can copy that code for our y velocity. Okay, so now we have random directions. And there you go. They're all bouncing around randomly. That's perfect. So now what we want to do is we want to check for collisions between one, say, highlighted ball. So let's highlight one of the balls. Well, if we're going to do that, we have to allow the ball to have its color changed. So we're going to create a variable in here, and we'll call it C, and that'll be the color of the ball. We'll initialize that value to red, because that's what we initially said the balls were going to be. And then instead of drawing a ball always in red, we'll draw it in this variable, which is red for now. But what we're going to do is in our driver, we're going to change the color of one of the balls. So let's say here, let's say we're creating all the balls. So when we're done creating them, let's say we do ball 4, which is actually the 5th one. We'll say dot set color, and we'll set it to green. Now, of course, this is red because we haven't created the method on the ball class to allow us to change the color. So let's do that now. Let's create this method. So now we have a method that allows us to change the color of the ball, and we're going to change ball of 4, or the 4th, or technically it's the 5th element, because the array started 0, to green. Let's make sure we have one ball that's green, and there it is. Okay, perfect. Now what we want to do is we want to detect collisions. Now in order to detect the collisions, we need the center of the ball. So that means we need, on our ball class, we need to write a method that will allow us to get or access the center coordinate of the ball. Now remember, the X and the Y position is the upper left position of the ball. So we want to write a method, public, and we'll return an int. We want to return the center horizontally, the X coordinate of the center of the ball. Well, what's that going to be? It's going to be the upper left plus half the width, or the diameter, which means half the diameter is really the radius. So we're going to return X plus diameter over 2. That's going to be the center coordinate, the X portion of the center of the circle. Now we want to copy this code, and we want to create another method that's going to return the center coordinate, but the Y coordinate this time. So it's Y plus diameter over 2. So now we can get the center of our ball, the X and the Y. Now we want to write a method to detect collisions. Okay, so here's our method. We're going to pass in a ball, which means we're going to take this ball, ourselves, which is whatever ball we're currently in, and we're going to check to see if it's colliding with whatever ball we pass in. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to use the distance formula. So we're going to declare a double, we'll call it D. And what's the distance formula? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to take the difference of the X values. So we're going to take our X value. And before we continue, I want to just show you that this is actually a mistake. Because remember, this is the center of the ball passed in, but this is not the center of our ball. This is the upper left coordinate. So what we really want is we want get center x of ourselves. So we can call this method to get our own center, and then we're going to subtract the center of the ball that was passed in. So the difference of the x's, now we want to raise this to the second power. So we do math.pow and then comma 2. So that raises this to the second power. And then what we want to do is we want to copy this code because we're going to do the same thing plus for the y coordinate. So we want to get the center of the y, and then we want to get the center of the y on the one that was passed in. And of course, we raise it to the second power. Last but not least, we want to take the square root of this whole thing. So now we have the distance between our centers. And we want to check that distance. We want to say if the distance is less than the sum of the radii. Well, our radii is diameter divided by 2 added to the diameter or the radius of the ball that was passed in. Get radius. So you know what we should do? We actually need a method on the ball to get the radius. So let's write that. Actually, because we have a variable called diameter, it should really be called get diameter. And let's just return the diameter. And then here we'll do get diameter, and then we'll just divide it by 2. That actually makes a little bit more sense. Okay. So we're checking to see if the distance is less than the sum of the radii, and if it is, we're going to return true, meaning we have a collision. If it's not, we'll return false. So now we have this detect collision method. Back to our driver, last step. When we move the ball, we want to check to see if we have a collision between the green ball and any other ball. And if we do, let's be consistent with the prior video. We'll change the other ball's color to yellow. So what we're going to do is we're going to loop here. Now you notice I'm creating a separate loop, and I'm doing that just for educational purposes. You could technically do it in here, but I want to keep things simple. So I'm going to create a separate loop, which is going to check for collisions with the green ball, which is ball 4. Okay, so what we're going to do is first we're going to make sure that we're not checking for a collision with its own self. So we want to make sure that I is not equal to 4, because we don't want to check to see if the green ball is colliding with itself. And as long as it's not equal to 4, what we want to do is we want to say if ball 4, and we want to call detect collision, and we're going to pass in the current ball that we're at in the array as we iterate through this array. And if there is a collision, what we want to do is we want to set that ball's color to yellow. If there's no collision, we want to set that ball's color, we'll copy this code, to red. And that's it. So once again, we're looping through all the balls. We're making sure that we're not checking the green ball against itself. And then we're checking the green ball against whatever ball we're at. Of course, again, we're skipping the green ball here. And if there is a collision between the green ball and whatever ball we're at in the array, we set the color to yellow. Otherwise, we set it back to red. All right, let's give it a try, see how this looks. And there's the green ball. And you can see every time it collides with something, it's changing the color to yellow, which is exactly the functionality that we want. I hope you learned something from watching this video. Please remember to subscribe and share this video with others who are learning Java programming. Thanks for watching, and take care, everyone.